People who don't know Jesus are missing out. Do you ever feel pain over that? If you don't, you just might be sleepwalking. Test number 2, go ahead and put it up on the screen, is the taste test. When I was a kid, I remember I had one dream, and in the dream, it was one of my favorite dreams of all time. I was sitting at the kitchen table, and there was a stack of pancakes in front of me. I mean a huge stack. It was like this big. And there was butter on the top, and it was dripping all over, and there was syrup on the top, and it was dripping all over. And I remember taking a big fork, and I just sliced right down through that and got a huge bite of pancakes right on my fork, put it in my mouth, and I started chewing, and I was just like, it had no flavor at all. Nothing at all. It was just kind of like, and the more I chewed, it didn't go anywhere either. I was just chewing and chewing. So I was like, well, maybe that's a bad bite. So I took another bite, and I got it, and it was terrible. And all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, now it's wet. And I opened my eyes, and it was my pillow. And I kid you not, I was eating my pillow. Friends, there are going to be some times in your life where you need to evaluate yourself on whether or not something that should be tasty isn't. I'll give you an example. Sunday morning, when we gather together to worship God, I will tell you this, it doesn't matter what songs we sing from the stage. It doesn't matter what scriptures we're looking at that day. When we gather together, it should be filled with excitement and joy in your life. Do you know why? Because we're getting together with God's people, and He has made us a guaranteed promise that when we gather together in His name, that when we gather together to worship Him and honor Him, He is here in our midst. The God of the universe is present. That's something that should excite you, invigorate you, and give your life joy. Have you ever found yourself going to a church service, and it's just like, what is that? And it doesn't taste very good at all. I think sometimes we can blame the church, but sometimes you can blame yourself. Maybe that's how you're sleepwalking. Test number 3 is what I call the clarity test. The clarity test for me is when I'm in a dream, I know I'm in a dream because I can never read anything in my dreams. It's weird. I will often have a dream where I've got a book or a clipboard and there's important information on that book or clipboard. Someone else has just read what's on the clipboard, and then they hand it to me, they give it to me, and then I'm supposed to read this important information on this clipboard. And I'll look at it, and the glare off the paper will be just so bright that I can't make sense of what's written on there. And I'll be like, I can't read that. And so I'll shade it from the glare, whatever's producing the light, and then it's so dark that I can't see anything either. And I'll go back and forth, and I'll try to switch really quickly to try to, but in my dreams I can never read anything. I don't know what the deal is. I'm never able to read anything in a dream. It's always this, it's glaring and stuff. And I want to ask you, have you ever had that experience when you're reading the Bible and you're just like reading the same line over and over and over again? It's something that should make sense, but it just doesn't. Sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes that's because you're sleepwalking. God is trying to do a work in your heart, and you're just kind of oblivious to what God's really doing. And you're just scanning the words. Whatever, whatever. That's the clarity test. The 4th test I call the reality test. My scariest dream ever was when I was probably 5 years old, and I was at church, and I was running around the outside of the church. We had these gigantic planter things in front of our church, and I was running around, and then I realized I was running because I was being chased, and I was being chased by a herd of cowboys. I don't know why. A herd of cowboys, and they were chasing me, and they were with a herd of Indians, I believe, and they were all chasing me, and I was trying to get away from them, and so I jumped into one of the planters so that I could hide. And as I was in there, I noticed on the ground there was a worm, just a little earthworm, and I bent down to look at it, and it jumped up and bit me on the finger. I tell you, it's the dream I remember most vividly. The worm bit me on the finger. Now, how many of you have ever been bitten by an earthworm? No, seriously, have you? No, it's impossible. It doesn't meet the reality test. Worms don't bite. They can't. It's physically impossible. Something that shouldn't happen is happening. What's the reality test when it comes to sleepwalking spiritually? I think it's this. When you're doing something and you're involved in something that just doesn't make sense when compared to the truth. Have you ever experienced this when you're like doing some type of religious kind of ritual? It's something that like maybe a church you grew up in did all the time and you didn't know why you were doing it. It didn't seem to ring true. This is your evaluation tool. This Bible right here, or the one you've got, will tell you whether or not something is intended to be done over and over again. Whether or not something is intended to be repeated time and time again. And if it is not in the pages of the Bible, then it's not guaranteed to be true, it's not guaranteed to be reality, it's not guaranteed to be God's desire, it just might be sleepwalking. It just doesn't make sense when compared to truth. Number 5, the last test for sleepwalking is what I call the integrity test. I could never fly in my dreams. It was my number one desire. I was a big fan of Superman, way cooler than Batman. I wanted to be Superman. I wanted to fly. And so at night, I would try to coerce myself into flying dreams by closing my eyes, and before falling asleep, I would say, I want to fly like Superman. I want to fly like Superman. I want to fly like Superman. And I never did. And there have been times in my life when I've been able to actually be in my dream, kind of conscious, playing with it and doing things. And in this one particular dream that became a recurring dream, I actually had it over and over again in various forms. I realized in my dream world I could not fly like Superman. However, I got to kind of pantomime this. I couldn't fly, but if I were to slowly lay myself down and stretch out my hands and then lift my feet up, I'm not going to do it, and then lift my feet up off the ground, just slowly, then I could get them off the ground and just kind of hover about 6 inches above the ground. I discovered this, and I could do it anytime I wanted to in one of my dreams. And I could just hover off the ground, and I would just kind of hovercraft myself. But it was kind of like I was riding on some type of, electromagnetic, wave or something. Because then if I wiggled, I could fall off the side. And so I would fall off one side, and I got really good at it. I learned how to surf my dream waves. And so I could get like 6 feet above the ground, 10 feet above the ground. I think the highest I ever got was maybe 15 feet or something. But just, it always had to start low and slow. And then I could just kind of move up from there. I could never fly like Superman, but I found a way